This week, Emmet interviews Fionnuala Doran, author of the graphic novel The Trial of Roger Casement. Roger Casement was a former British Foreign Office diplomat of Irish heritage who took an interest in the human rights violations of colonialism and also got interested in Irish nationalism. He ended up arrested for treason, outed as gay, tried, convicted, and executed. Emmet and Fionnuala also talk a bit about Preacher and the recent new direction in the X-Men titles. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
This is Emmet.
And this is Fionnuala.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Hello and welcome to another episode of Deconstructing Comics. This is Emmet O'Cuna in Melbourne, and I am joined on the line by Fionnuala Doran over in... Where are you based now?
I'm in Leeds at the minute.
Leeds? Oh, very good.
Leeds, yes.
And Fionnuala is the creator, author, illustrator of The Trial of Roger Casement, which is published by Self-Made Hero, and is a lyrical biography of an Irish martyred revolutionary. It's a stunning piece of work. I'm really excited to talk to her about it. How would you summarize the book yourself?
Well, that's a good question. It's an attempt to communicate in some way without putting the sheen of I know exactly what Casement's life was and I know exactly what he thought. It's an attempt to communicate the last kind of 2 years of his life and the ambiguity about what is known about that and about what his feelings and intentions were, because the history, especially with the two different versions of his diary and the wrangling that has gone on ever since his death about his life and what actually happened, it's an attempt to tell the story of those 2 years without being authoritative on it, but at the same time without fudging a lot of things, and trying to capture the appeal of Casement, that there's a lot of things we don't know about them, but there's also a lot we do know. Like in his diaries, that he kept a secret. There's a lot of detail about his desires and his relationships and his wants, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff about what really motivated him that's still kind of a mystery. Yeah. Especially towards the last period in his life, especially when he was coming to try and stop the Easter Rising happening in 1916.
And the way you've written his voice as well, from the very beginning, he's testing out metaphors, he's testing out how to address the reader. He's composing this sort of speech. And then towards the end of your graphic novel, he delivers the famous speech. So there's this sort of self-reflective approach you've taken to him. And it's almost like you're winking at the reader as well. And I really enjoyed that because it sort of invited us to attempt to understand the man, like this sense of who he was, just because he's speaking to us in this sort of cheeky way. And when you're skipping through time as well, up until the events of his trial, again, it's like memory. It's like fading in and out of memory when someone's trying to recapture what happened and they're trying to choose how to present it to us. Yeah,
I think that's what's something that's kind of a theme throughout just my interest in Irish history is this idea of memory and the importance of memory, not just for Casement, but for all of Irish history, because it's so conditional on your pre-existing beliefs and your own experience, like how you experience and how you interpret it. It's very, the idea of Irish history is very, romanticized and poetic and also subjective. And it's to try and capture that, because I think since I've only lived outside of Ireland from 2015 on, and it was kind of surprising to realize that other people had this idea that there existed a kind of authoritative version of history that you could rely on that wasn't clouded in kind of fairy tales and romanticisms and different narratives for different parts of the community. So part of my jumping back and forth in time and having this kind of self-aware voice is to play with that kind of the way that history is always I've always experienced it, that it's not subjective.
Hmm.
That it's always being told by someone who has a pre-existing agenda, whether they are aware of it or not, or a pre-existing bias. And also, I think Casement himself was aware of that, because when he was writing his white diaries, if you will call them that, there's an element of that where he was kind of like writing for an audience, as if one day he would write an autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's writing for himself, it's a completely different style of writing. And again, with his final speech in the court, that wasn't a speech to the judge, that was a speech to the wider public. That was a speech meant to be read by other people, outside of the courtroom and outside of that day. That was meant to resonate for a much longer time. And it was kind of self-aware in that way. He delivered it, not just for that moment in time, but for his compatriots, or for kind of people sympathetic to his cause. He would read it, 50 years time, and quote it. It's a very he had a very self-aware style of delivering speeches like that.
And your book builds to that moment, as I said before, but it becomes very moving as a result, because you've got this sense of he's saying all the things he needs to say. And even, as you say, in his recording of his life in his different diaries, you got this notion of a divided self, and at the end it's like, all right, I'm going to synthesize all of this into one speech, and I'm going to deliver it, and that's where I'm going to leave you with.
But there's a line in his speech: is it the freedom to love who we love? That feels like there's no way he could have written that speech and not meant it as a reference to his sexuality. So I'm sure at the time he was aware that he had been publicly outed. And there is probably some, I think I read in someone's diary, there's an ex-boyfriend of his who lived around Belfast at the time, who, maybe that was intended for the future when his sexuality would be accepted, or for other people living kind of in the closet, or maybe it was actually intended for the people he couldn't, maybe one person he couldn't have had that relationship that would now, in today's modern society, that could have lived together as equal partners. Maybe that was directed at one person. But it certainly wasn't directed at the moment to the judge and to the jury. Well, there was no jury, but to the judge and the courtroom.
Well, that was something about the book that struck me as well, and I've tried to do some reading on how the Trial of Roger Casement was received by reviewers, and the reviews it received. And one thing I noticed was there didn't appear to be a lot of discussion of Casement's sexuality and how you've treated of his sexuality. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm happy to be pointed to sources, but what I took away from the book a lot was you were showing how he took pleasure in his life, and you were showing how this was something that he celebrated, and then he got something out of. And it's not this depiction of homosexuality as this sinful, regretful, guilty secret. It's no, he was having a sex life. He was having a romantic life. He wasn't a self-hating gay man one of the other 1916 founders. Oh, which one was it? It wasn't Pierce.
Was it Padraig Pierce? Yeah. There's a lot of writing about his sexuality, and he seemed to be very, so deep in the closet that not to be kind of I don't know, blasé or crass about it, but he didn't even kind of know himself. Where it seems Casement was very self-aware and very aware that he desired what he desired from other people and from other men, and he enjoyed having, he enjoyed physical contact, and he enjoyed having relationships with other men. He wasn't ashamed of himself. He knew that other people would judge him for it, but he didn't seem to judge himself. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot in his writing where he's expressing self-hatred or recrimination or wishing that he wasn't gay. And that's surprising for the time, but it's also really exciting that he wasn't, when he was with other men, he was doing it to enjoy himself, and that's recorded in his diaries as well.
And he was very cosmopolitan as well, so it wasn't like he was limited to Irish society. He travels with the revolutionary movement to America, and he's traveling to Europe, but also as a figure of the English establishment, he's traveled throughout the colonies, he's traveled to Africa, he's traveled to the colonies, he's been around the world. So
Yeah.
he's lived a life, he's experienced all these things. So he's not sheltered or in any way shut in.
Yeah.
He's definitely having an authentic life, if you want to call it that way. I was thinking, I was recently reading about like Sartre writing about Gide's writing,
Yeah.
and how he can't get over the fact that Gide is completely. This is where he's trying to explain Gide's psychology, and he can't get over how he's unrepentant in his homosexuality. He's like, oh, why doesn't he feel shame for this? Like, he can't understand it.
Yeah.
But
like,
because he
there
didn't.
seem to be any. Yeah. Yeah, because he was accepted. That was who he was. And it wasn't something to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if that continued, like, towards the end of his life when he apparently converted to Roman Catholicism, but, like, through his diaries and his writings, there isn't the typical, like, self-hating, oh no, why am I this way? Why must I be alone in the world? Kind of.
Do you think that could
kind
be
of thing?
His conversion could have been a political statement in its own right? This sense of cohesion with the movement. They are Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
They are Irish, and the Anglo-Irish had to be more Irish than the Irish almost.
Yeah. It could have been, like, I also kind of think of it, maybe he wanted to feel, like, I think at the end, like, maybe he felt quite abandoned because the other firstly, he had been traveling to stop the rising taking place because he knew, like, what a cost it would cost, the cost of it in human lives.
Yeah.
And by the time his trial came about, he'd been imprisoned for months by himself. And, like, all his friends had, his previous, like, kind of supporters had been scared away from supporting him because of his, his public outing. And maybe this was his way of trying to find, like, a community because, he was in the Tower of London. Obviously, it was very unsympathetic guards and not a lot of visitors. Maybe just in the last few days of his life, he felt like, I want to be part of something. I want to feel accepted into something instead of just dying on my own. Yeah. Because I can't imagine how, when I was writing the book and preparing it, I was just thinking about those last, couple of, I'm not sure, was it months or maybe between kind of early Easter time and August the 3rd, 1916, these basically being locked in prison on your own and how, like, and you're isolated from what's happening around you in terms of news and stuff like that, and how just destroying that must be. Yeah. Knowing that basically everyone you've pissed off in the past in the British establishment is coming to make sure that you're publicly humiliated and that your name is dirt, and knowing that you're probably likely to be hanged, and you're not even going to get, like, a shooting like the other 1916 leaders got. You're going to be hanged and thrown into just a pit outside of Pentonville. He was just like, something I need some kind of comfort. I need some kind of family at the end of my life, and this is just one way to get it.
Yeah. Was that the attraction of him as a subject to you, that he is yet another Irish martyr, but he's one who has been erased from the record, if you like, or he's been...
Oh, yeah, because he's not, like, revered in the same way as... It's kind of changing a little bit, but he's not revered in the same way that Patrick Pearse would be. And a lot of that is over, like, the ambiguity of his life. Like, he didn't fight in the Rising. He actually, when you think about it, he made the right call. He knew it was going to cost hundreds of people's lives, and that the Germans weren't providing enough ammunition for it, so it wouldn't, even with the best of intentions, it wouldn't be successful, and he tried to call it off. But, was foiled in that. So it's not like he fits in that narrative of the brave soldier who is, rising up against, the overpowering state. Like, the concern for the practical concern of protecting the lives of all the volunteers who would be murdered by the British state during the uprising. And that kind of cuts him out of that, the soldier narrative, and it cuts him out of, I was in the Rising exhibition underneath the GPO, and it didn't actually mention Casement the whole way through, and I thought, well, because that doesn't fit with their narrative. Like, their narrative, like, the leaders kind of operating all the military things, and, like, he wasn't a military person. Like, he knew the cost of that to actual human lives, and that doesn't fit in with a lot of, like, super masculine narratives of warfare and, rebellion and rising and stuff like that.
When I lived in Dublin, I used to work for the Revenue Commissioners, and I used to work for their comms department. and I did some research for them for the Customs Museum that they've set up down there. And one story I came across was that when they took one of the government buildings on the opposite side of the Liffey, the staff had been on a tea break, and they came back and they found these soldiers in their office, and they're like, "Oh, right, you are. Sorry." And I was like, "So nothing's changed, you know? Like it was 2005 when I did this research. I go, oh yeah, tea breaks. I go on long tea breaks.
Yeah.
Mr. Revolution." But I think the Irish context for say comic readers from outside of Ireland or outside the UK who are not familiar with the events of 1916, I'm trying to think what other reference they would have as entry points. And the first one that jumps into my mind is Preacher, because you had...
Actually, yes. Garth Ennis is actually speaking this weekend at the Lex Festival in Kendal in the Lake District.
Oh, very good.
I was just thinking, like, I was really into Preacher when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I was a teenager in the late 90s in Northern Ireland when the Good Friday Agreement was being signed. Yeah. And there's something about Preacher and the work of Garth Ennis that really speaks of, like, the Irish experience of kind of war and, like, the trouble and, like, disruption.
Yeah. Yeah, I was around the same age. And I was at a party, and I walked past this guy, and he was loudly saying to everyone around him, "And there's this Irish vampire, and he kicks Michael Collins in the balls." And I was like, well, I have to read this.
Yeah. I completely forgot about that.
What is this book?
And he's like, the vampire, what Cassidy is like trying to, he's just like, oh shit, I don't give a fuck about this anymore. I'm just going to kind of escape. And then he gets bitten by the vampire. Yeah, I really like that take on it. Like, he just doesn't want to die. And that's what the experience of almost pretty much everyone, like, during the Rising must have been. Like, I don't want to die, like, just in the dirt here. Can I just, escape?
And Ennis introduces all that, though. Like, there's comedy in it, and there's gore in it, and you see the loss of life, and Steve Dunn's art just has all these heads exploding and bullets flying through them, and all this graphic depiction of the Rising and what the cost of life was. But you also have that really sinister moment with Podrick Pierce talking about the blood sacrifice and this idea of martyrdom as deliberate propaganda for the future, and the sacrifice, this deliberate, which is what Casement was trying to avoid.
Yeah, no, that's really, like, when you say, like, Pierce being kind of held up as a hero, and, like, I don't want to keep saying like all the time, I kind of think of Pierce as a nut job. Yes. Like, he was a nut job, and of the idea of blood sacrifice. Yeah. And he could argue that he was successful in that he made martyrs out of everyone who was leading the Rising. But in terms of, what does that mean in terms of practicality? What does that mean to other people whose names are being forgotten, whose names aren't, engraved into posters that are sold in the GPO? What does it mean for, the nameless children and people on the street who were, hit by bullets or hit by falling rubble and stuff like that? Yeah. What's the cost in, what's the cost in people who don't get to be famous at the end of it? I think that's something anyone who's kind of lived through the Troubles will kind of empathize with, because you see the fallout of that in everyday life and the people around you, and other people abroad, like the Irish Americans or people in Britain, they'll see like the larger picture, but you see, people who are bereaved and people who have been injured, and you're asking yourself, like, what is the cost of this?
Yeah. And again, it's this idea of, we started this conversation talking about the historical record and who knows what and who's telling who what. Yeah. And where it comes to this idea of sacrifice and martyrdom, again, it's this power of storytelling, and that could be quite a sinister thing. Quite a controlling thing. And I grew up in the 80s, and I do remember, like, even like national school, like very young age, coming to school, and there would be these posters on the wall of the martyrs, and that's the first thing you see when you walk into the school, like these figures and these holy figures, if you like, and that's how they were, and you don't question that narrative because it's enshrined as this is who we are. And as a result, if you don't question it, you don't learn from what happened, and you don't learn of the cost of life, and you don't learn of maybe what else was happening at the time. And history requires that. History has to be porous. There has to be that ability to question the record. Because otherwise it's just dogma. So, again, this is why I was excited by your book, because I felt you challenge some of those dominant ideas of what happened, and of course lifting up Roger Casement as well is very important, I think, for any reader who's interested in 1916, but particularly I feel Irish readers would be very moved by it.
One thing, if I had more time, I would have gone into more detail about his relationship with the other kind of, Irish insurgency leaders at the time, and how they weren't all like a band of brothers. I think I included a bit about Joseph Plunkett in there, and Plunkett coming to Casement to tell him about, you're being sent on this futile mission to get arms from Germany, and we know it's not going to work, but you just have to do it anyway. And then I had his face like turning into just like an empty kind of skull while he's speaking to them. Just
that was Mignola-esque. I felt you're a hint of Mignola there. Sorry.
Well, I was trying to symbolize how, and I really love Mike Mignola. Like I wish I could draw like him. And I love his like the use of blacks in it that are really atmospheric. And I was thinking of that, when he does things like Rasputin. Kind of fading into the shadows and how sinister that feels. That was kind of what I was looking to go for. Like to Casement, like Plunkett wasn't, a great hero. He was also another kind of nut job who was asking to do something that was impossible. And like on it, you basically putting him on a mission that could never succeed. And he must have. I'm trying to visualize the frustration and confusion and kind of just exhaustion he must have felt at that time. And also just kind of how detached, they must have been from each other as people as well, because they had like very different value systems, and they're interested in, an independent Irish state for very different reasons. I kind of had this long running idea about doing like a kind of a series of like short comedy, like Peanut style strips about James Connolly and Padraig Pearse like trapped inside the GPO together, and Padraig Pearse just driving James Connolly up the wall by being just like, oh, this is a blood sacrifice, and James Connolly kind of slowly dying, being like, oh my god, shut him up.
Well, I think it's important for you to mention then, did you also, your comic on Countess Markovich, which was a runner-up in the Observer and Comica Cape competition.
A Donkey Cape competition 2014,
That's the one. And so it's her experience around the Rising. And she's another sort of, I guess you'd call her an aristocrat, and she is an aristocrat. Anglo-Irish heritage, and she's involved in the movement. But you've styled the story like a celebrity article in a glossy magazine. I love that approach. I thought it was so funny. And again,
I'd love to go back to that actually and redo it, because if you look at it from a technical point of view, I didn't actually add any spaces between the panels, and that really pisses me off now.
Well, it's almost like when you read like I'm trying to drag up a name of a magazine. Heat. Let's go with Heat. Heat magazine.
Yeah.
And there'd be no bleed at all. It would just be like the text overlaid on top of the image, and your eyes just going down. It's about the image. It's not about the text. The words don't even matter sometimes. But I loved that approach. Just that again, that sort of winking at the reader. Similar to what you do here, but I think Roger Casement's a little more restrained in that approach, but it's still there. Yes. There's still this sort of comedy almost to it, this deadpan comedy.
So I think that's something like that's very a kind of self-aware deadpan comedy is something that's very consistent within kind of Irish literature. Like I think everything Garth Ennis does, even the really exaggerated, over-the-top stuff, is very like self-aware, kind of winking at the reader. And even if you get down to, Samuel Beckett and James Joyce, there's also the kind of element of satire. I don't know whether it's connected to the idea of being Irish and having to explain, whenever you go outside the island, you have to explain like everything from scratch about, oh no, it's not just England with a slightly different accent. We have a completely different history, and especially when you kind of operate in England or in America, and you have to start by explaining, well, actually, when I grew up, there were British soldiers kind of all over the place, and bombs going off, and no one was allowed to the city centre after 6 o'clock at night, and you got all your goods scanned before you went into the airport. And it's kind of this awareness that nobody really knows anything about the context in which you exist.
Yeah.
And also, it makes you aware when you see narratives from Britain and from America as well, that they're telling a story of themselves that you don't recognise, particularly when you watch things like Downton Abbey, and there's that, what do you call that, Irish butler in it, and you're thinking, no.
Yeah.
You're watching like other people, other cultures try and sell themselves in the way that from the way you experience your life, that they don't fit together, and it gives you this kind of like outside perspective on things.
It's funny, when I was preparing for this interview. Yeah, no, absolutely. When I was preparing for this conversation, I did think of Downton Abbey. It did pop into my head because the movie's just come out as well, so there's a lot of talk about it, and the plot of the movie revolves around the characters getting ready for the Queen to visit. So they're getting the estate ready for the Queen, and there's a Republican in the household, and apparently, I've not seen the film. I don't believe I've made it through one episode of the show, so I'm probably not a fair critic of it, but it just sticks in my craw, the entire premise of the show. But supposedly the Republican character, by the end of the film, is also bowing and scraping to the Queen and like, oh, this way, your Highness, and all the rest.
I'm sure the Queen was so pure of heart and charming that she just charmed the socks off him. It's kind of this idea that we can all, why don't we? And actually, it actually reminds me of that debate going on Twitter about George W. Bush and Ellen DeGeneres.
Yes.
Like, why can't we all be nice to each other? It's a very privileged idea that kind of ignores, like, what about the thousands of people who died from WMDs?
Yeah.
The same as like a Republican buying Queen. What about the hundreds of people who are, currently being oppressed in the north of Ireland under your gerrymandered regime? But no, you're a nice person. You're nice to me, so I'll bow down and pay my respects.
The take on, so at the time of recording, it's just the 10th of October, and this Ellen story is just broken on Twitter. But the take I keep seeing about that is, well, yes, rich people stick together. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your ideological point of view is. If you're immensely wealthy, you stick together. You don't side against your class peers.
Yeah. Oh, it's impolite to mention, the deaths of thousands of Iraqis. That would be impolite, That's not as important as being, as what's the word for like a culture of polite. No, the polite isn't the word. The culture of respectable discourse.
Yeah.
Whereas we can't. Yeah. Well, actually, it also reminds me of Bernadette Devlin, and I really love her story about slapping the Home Secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of thing is obviously frowned upon in the House of Commons, but what other response is there when someone's denying the massacre of a dozen people by British state forces, and you see that is it impolite to slap someone? Yeah, but it's also impolite to murder people. Is it impolite to tell George W. Bush that he's responsible for thousands of deaths? But it's also kind of impolite to do that in the first place.
Coming up, colonialism, Preacher, and the X-Men. First, thanks to all our supporters at patreon.com/deconcomics. More classic episodes of Deconstructing Comics have been unlocked, and I'm releasing them at the rate of one per week in reverse order. This week I'll be republishing episode 85, in which Mulele and I discuss the question, should a writer go ahead with an idea if they discover that someone else has already done it? The classic episodes can be found on our Facebook and Twitter feeds, by clicking on the earliest months listed on the left sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com or in publicly available posts on our Patreon page. Classic episodes have now been unlocked back to episode 46. Check out all our goals and help us reach them at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
I mean, I see the trial of Roger Casement itself as like his sexuality and his actual involvement in the gun running is almost like gilding the lily for the greater crime of betraying his class. Like the fact that he's siding with these people beneath the English establishment.
Yeah.
That's why he's really on trial. That's why he needs to be made a mockery
because
of.
he's like, and through his work in the Congo and Peru, like exposing the crimes of very rich people against the poor and vulnerable. That's also like a class of trial, like pointing out the injustices that are inherent in like the rubber trade or in the trade of, I think it was a type of rubber. It might have been other produce in Peru. That's like, why are you making us out to be the bad guys? When we're the ones in charge. It's kind of a cross way of putting it. I'm trying to think of a better way to put it. But it's kind of like, you're upper middle class. You should be respectful of those above you. You should not be siding with those below you unless it's kind of a church sympathy where you give out alms to the poor. You shouldn't be conspiring with them to plot against us, your social betters. And also with Casement, I think there's an element of disgust that, when his diaries were released, that he wasn't ashamed of being gay as well. So that was also part of the vitriol against him from, people who knew him. It's like, not only are you a homosexual, but you're actually not ashamed of it. Like, how dare you?
Yeah. You must forgive me. But I know this is a really serious topic, but my head immediately went to John Cleese and the Two Ronnies. I'm upper class. I look down on him. I'm middle class. I look up to him.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not supposed to conspire with the people who are down the chain. That's kind of a thing I see in like unionism in Northern Ireland all the time, that you're not supposed to, it's the DUP working a very like, everybody in the working class just respect us because we're your social betters, and the UP as well. There hasn't been like a genuine working class, party for the interest of the working class in unionism for a long time, and it's really let their leadership down. It's really let the community down as well in terms of, it's mostly like in Northern Ireland, it's mostly the interest of the better class, like unionist community that looked after. In terms of like, if you look at the Arlene Foster cash for ash scandal, it was well-off farmers who were ripping the taxpayer off for hundreds of millions of pounds. Well, East Belfast gets very little in terms of infrastructure funding or social funding or council funding. There's an element of there's a kind of class element within Britain and its political system and its kind of colonial political systems as well, that it means like when you violate like class rules, there's kind of a disgust expressed against you. There's just a kind of incomprehension of how you could think outside of your own political class within society.
Yes. And even at the time, right now, and I don't want us to get into the conversational weeds, but this is what your mention of the Unionist Party brings me in mind of. another aspect of this period you've written your comic on is how much hatred and how much fear there was around the prospect of Ireland having home rule, to the point where there was funding of unionist movements in Ireland to resist, like by any means necessary, the handing of home rule to Ireland.
Yeah.
This was going to be, there's going to be violence in the streets. And I've seen this, I had forgotten that. I had forgotten that a lot of the political wing had come from that initial, that was the actual bone of contention, was home rule. I'd forgotten that, and it's now come back into some writing on Brexit, because now they're saying this is 100 years later, it's the same issue again.
Yeah.
It's this notion of the Irish question is once again.
Yeah, I remember studying the Corn Laws for my A levels, and I think at the time, how the hell would this ever be relevant to my life? And also, the Corn Laws were tied up with the issue of the potato famine in Ireland, and like tariffs and food protectionism, and the issue of Ireland and what to do with the Irish people was huge at that time. And it came back in Home Rule. It seems to come back every 100 or so years and just be like, what the hell are we supposed to? Why won't these people just like accept? Like, why was it just like politely just shut up and go away?
Yeah, yes.
And like, no, why do they have to keep causing problems?
Yeah. Again, it's an apocryphal quote, but I choose to believe that Winston Churchill did say the problem with the Irish is they refuse to believe that they're English, or they refuse to be English, I think is.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if that's something he actually said, but it does sound like him.
It sounds like something like the political class just doesn't understand the idea that you would not want to be like them. And that's also an issue with like the Conservative Party in England trying to understand like working class. Why don't you just? I don't understand. You mean you don't want to be like, you don't want to be upper class? Or you don't want to be like a landlord? Yeah. But I don't. What? Like incomprehension of like how you could want to exist outside the existing system of like class and nationality and interest and things like that. But yeah, it's like an interesting, like Ireland's kind of a microcosm of, it's the journey of a lot of the ex-colonies as well, in terms of like the fight for independence and the relationship of trade to England and trade to the colonial master, and how that influences domestic politics and how that ends up being a massive problem for domestic politics. In unexpected
it's a continuing burden that just goes down through the years.
Yeah.
Like it never really goes away.
Yeah. It never can properly get resolved. One of the things you talk about and you end up going down loads of silent because there's just so much to it, and it's really under discussed in modern, like, even in Northern Ireland as well. People are afraid to discuss these things properly because there's so much controversy and so many different alternate takes on history and on the present as well, that it's just hard to have a debate without descending into actual physical violence in the debate hall.
Yeah. Well, I still remember growing up, that the expression was no politics or religion at the dinner table. Like, that's just it. Talk about this.
Yeah.
Which, of course, means that eliminates a lot of conversation. That could probably help air some issues.
Yeah.
But I read as well that you had initially planned to do the life of Roger Casement. Like you were going to attempt. The initial plan. But I do like your approach in its current form, because I do think there's this, as you say, there's a microcosm perspective on the entire situation in Ireland through the events of his life, towards the end of his life. You touch on all these different things, you touch on all these figures, and the reader who maybe is not familiar with Plunkett or not familiar with what happened in 1916 can follow those trails. It's there for them to do. But when did you realize the prospect of a biography was not, like a full-length life biography was not sustainable?
Quite quickly, because I have notebooks full of research on this, and full gigabytes upon gigabytes of things on my computer. And my main focus of the book was always going to be like telling his life story, but kind of framed around the trial. Yeah. And as I started to kind of put out the basic building blocks of it, about a couple of months in after, because I did a small version for my final project at the Royal College of Art, which was about a kind of condensed version of the Casement report told in the form of a comic. It was about 65 pages, but it was done, like, the pages were quite small. And I was going to include some of the work in that into the larger, like, Trial of Roger Casement graphic novel. I used a small book to pitch the larger story, but quite soon into the process developing the larger story, it became apparent that there simply wasn't enough time or room for it. Yeah. I think if you were going to do his whole life, or even include bits of his life from outside those last kind of years involved with the, you know, Irish independence movement and with the, you know, the rising, you would need something about 300 pages. Just if you weren't going to gloss over those parts.
Yeah.
Because there's bits I could have made reference to, but it really, to put it in proper context, you would need like a Marvel style text bubble giving you all the background information, like Chris Claremont used to do in the X-Men, where he put a text bubble and explained someone's life history beside them.
The sum totality of Roger Casement's power.
Yeah.
Focus psychic blade, Roger Casement. I want to mash it now.
Yeah. I'm actually just thinking now, I'm thinking of that, the comic I did about his time in the Congo. It'd be really interesting to do like some kind of like version of the Casement report in the style of Tintin, given that Tintin in the Congo is Hergé's kind of attempt to sanitize what happened there for a Belgian audience. But the problem with that would be
it was a children's magazine for young fascists, young budding fascists.
Yeah. The only problem with the case, like if you did it with Casement's investigation, it doesn't really have a satisfying ending because there was outrage, but then World War I broke out and everybody forgot that what the Belgians had done, and there's still no there's still compensation to the people of the Congo River Basin about what happened. It's still been used as a proxy for, you know, during the Cold War, and now it's been exploited for, you know, rare earth minerals, and you know, the root cause of the disruption there for the past 100 or more years is European drawing up our borders and then the complete exploitation and destruction of the community by the Belgian king 100 years ago. I mean, when you really look into the details of the Casement reports, what happened there was appalling. Like, the society was completely torn apart. You know, their history, their social structure was erased, and they were basically used as human machines to harvest rubber. And there's no attempt made after that exploitation officially stopped to rebuild society. They're kind of like, in a lot of ways, like a lot of post-colonial societies, the oppressors kind of withdraw and then say, okay, you're on your own now. Why aren't you standing up yet? You know, there's no attempt to give them recompense or to get them to an equal standing. You're just left in a kind of pile of blood and told to fend for yourself. Yeah.
It's interesting as well because one of the point of references that I thought of when I read your book was Alex Cox's film Walker, which again is about American adventurer advancing American interests in South America. And one of the points that has always stuck with me, of course, is that Alex Cox decided to just throw out the historical record at times to just have these surreal moments. And there's these scenes where a character will be walking down a dirt road and then a modern sports car will come racing past. And the implication is that we've taken a historical fork leading to this. This is what's coming. And I feel sometimes if you just mess with the historical narrative approach, if you just throw in this surreality, it does throw it into relief a lot more. You realize more the context of what you've just seen. And having Casement, I'm not saying people didn't swear in 1916, but introducing Casement lying on a beach going, oh fuck, you know, like that's a moment of, this is different. There's something else going on here.
Come to think of it, I've just realized that that's probably influenced a lot by reading Preacher when I was a teenager, and there's a scene where, is it Star is like trying to escape from something in the desert, and there's a whole page of him just running towards the reader, falling down every second panel, like going, "Oh fuck!" And it gets closer and closer. But it's a reminder that, you know, you don't often see in like mainstream comics, like people being like, I slipped on my own foot and hurt myself. Oh, this is really sore. This is really painful.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, when someone's pulling themselves out of the sea, it's actually really sore and painful, and they probably are swearing all over the place.
Yeah. A few months ago, I was in a cinema here in Melbourne, and I saw Ruth Negga, and I was going, oh, there's Ruth Negga.
Oh, in the cinema?
She was just there, and my wife was with me, and she was going, no, don't be stupid, that's not her. she's not here. Turns out, yes, they filmed Preacher here in Melbourne.
Oh, really?
For the last season was filmed here. It actually takes place in Australia. It takes place in Melbourne. I haven't watched it yet because I was left a little high and dry by the second season. But I now need to watch it because I want to see all the Australian landmarks and like pop up in Preacher and have Cassidy and Tulip and Jesse wandering around Vic markets here in Melbourne like that. Yeah. That'll be an experience.
Like, I watched the first season but haven't watched it since because I kind of got the idea that they probably wouldn't get to the end point in the comics of killing like the inbred offspring of God. It's kind of like when they're doing his Dark Materials for TV, I'm just wondering myself, should I get invested? Because I don't really think that they'll kill God at the end.
I'm just really upset that they cast Lin-Manuel Miranda in the Sam Elliott role that Sam Elliott was born to play.
I know. I'm really confused by that. Although, like, fair enough, I love that character from his Dark Materials, but that is a Sam Elliott role.
It's just, that's him straight up.
Well,
I mentioned to you before we started recording that I've been really entertained by your X-Men tweets, particularly when Jonathan Hickman started his current run. Deconstructing comics is a sort of unofficial policy of, can we not talk about Marvel and DC all the time?
Yeah.
And I respect that policy. But I think we've given the listeners a very heady conversation with lots of different things for them to research and follow up on, particularly in relation to Irish history.
Yeah.
So let's talk about X-Men. I've only read the first issue of the Hickman run. I think it was House of X, which is we meet the Krakoa set up for the first time. But I've been following the conversation on Twitter, and I suspect that the conversation on Twitter is more fun than anything happening in the books. Are you actually enjoying the Hickman comics?
I was really enjoying the House of X, which was kind of set in the present day, and the Powers of X, which is set across several layers of time and alternate realities, is more confusing. I'm not entirely sure I completely understand what was going on in it. But I do really enjoy the central idea of Moira McTaggart being central, being as important as Magneto and Charles Xavier in the formation of the X-Men.
Yeah,
because that's I love the idea of her being cast in the movies. It's just a little scholarship like Moira McTaggart. Although I'm really annoyed that don't phoneticize her accent at all, or make any reference to her. Like, she's got a beret on in one scene, but there's no tartan or anything. It'd be really funny to have a little Scottish lady kind of like, kills someone in Apocalypse to go. That's a terrible Scottish accent, but you get my drift.
Well, you already have.
That's really exciting.
Rose Byrne plays her in the movies, doesn't she? So you've got an Australian doing an American accent.
Yeah, for a Scottish character.
Yeah, for a Scottish character.
Yeah.
So it's already confusing. I just watched Dark Phoenix the other day, and it was a depressing experience overall.
Yeah.
So,
I actually I pulled out a comic that had been donated to our students, and it was, I don't know if you're ever aware of Joe Quesada's, or however you pronounce his name, MYX. It came out in 2003, 2004. It introduces X-23 to the 616 universe.
Yeah, it was like Jubilees living on the streets and stuff like that.
No, that was the original. That was the original pitch for it from Brian Wood and Dave Cho that got cancelled. And if anybody's interested in looking for like good like juice or good tea from the early like noughties, Dave Cho went on a rant on a message board about what was in, like, why it was cancelled, and he, like, threw all these insults at everyone at Marvel and basically burned his comic book career to the ground. It's all in the Wayback Machine. I was researching this a while ago just out of curiosity because I was on the internet at the time and used to have it all bookmarked in my old Firefox browser. And it's just like, you look back at it and like, oh, the early days of the internet, whenever every creator was online on like a Usenet kind of mailing group and just slagging each other off.
Yeah, no one's going to look at this in a couple of years' time.
Yeah. Oh, this will be deleted. No one will remember this. But yeah, no, they revived the idea after the Wood Joe idea went down the pan in about the year 2000. So 2003 it came out, and the art in it is really good. But it introduces X-23 as like a teenage prostitute, and it's so offensive and bad. It's like the story is so it's just so misjudged in so many levels. And like everyone in the covers is sucking lollipops because they're all on E. That was the thing. That was the thing. Like, you can tell someone at Marvel was like, "What are kids doing these days? They're doing E. Let's put that in the comic. What are kids like these days?"
Well, like, I remember, was it Joe Casey who was taking over the Uncanny X-Men book when Grant Morrison got New X-Men, and he decided to prepare for the gig by going to a cabin in the mountains somewhere and just doing lots of drugs because he felt he needed to hold up his side of the psychonaut equation with Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison probably did his best work when he was straight edge. So like, and again, these sad stories.
I know. I remember as a kid reading X-Men, just thinking, oh, there's just a machine running in an office somewhere, and you find out what was happening behind the scenes, and you're kind of like, oh, this is way more interesting than I thought it was.
All the gossip.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I didn't ask you about your teaching at all, actually, and I feel that you have been teaching a course in graphic novels, haven't you?
Yes, I was teaching until June this year at Teesside University.
Teesside,
and Teesside is in Middlesbrough, which is about 30 miles south of Newcastle. And I was teaching on the BA Comics and Graphic Novels. I just started up an MA in Comics and Graphic Novels this year after I left, and I'm now teaching at Leeds Arts University's BA in Comic and Concept Art.
Fantastic.
So it's really good to be talking, although teaching is really exhausting in terms of the amount of, because you really want, like when you're teaching, you really want to help people get better, and especially when you're talking about comics and ideas, it's very exciting to talk to people and kind of help them develop their ideas or point out, oh, have you looked at this or that, or have you thought about including this in your work? Like today I was using a reference to Howard the Duck and Squirrel Girl as references for like really like funny cover design.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to learn about comics from the students as well, because they have so many comics as a form is not, it's not like solidified the same way that kind of fine art is, or fine art photography or fashion.
Yes.
There's still so many ways it can go, and the students can bring as many ideas as I can to the plate about what they can do with it as a medium.
Yeah, that was something that struck me when I came to Australia first, that when I started going to the convention scene here, I noticed that manga and anime has much larger presence than I'd seen in the UK before.
Yeah.
Just through geographic proximity. Like there is just this, in Australia there are far broader sources of comic art available to young people coming up through the scene now. And if you look at if you go on DeviantArt and look for Australian artists, a lot of them will have this strong manga influence in their work, as well as the American stuff, as well as whatever else they can get their hands on. And that always struck me as quite notable, whereas growing up, anyone I knew who had any interest in being a comic artist, they were imitating your Brian Bolans, and they'd be trying to, like Chris Bachelor was a breath of fresh air for a lot of kids I knew growing up.
I was just mentioning him today. Like, I remember, like in the mid-90s, and he was drawing Generation X. About 1995, him and Joe Mad on Uncanny X-Men must have both gotten into anime and manga at the same time, because their styles completely changed. From like kind of traditional kind of Art Adams, and Bichello's case is more like it was kind of like
Sienkiewicz kind of?
Yeah, Sienkiewicz, and then overnight it seemed like they completely changed, and like mashup of like Western and manga styles that they're stuck with ever since.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. Like, and that was the gateway for a lot of American readers to that kind of stuff, because maybe they talked about it in interviews in Wizard or whatever. They say, "Oh, well, I'm a big fan of Akira or something," and people go, "Oh, what's this Akira thing they're talking about?"
Yeah.
So there was still this bleed, but it was maybe slower than, say, here in Australia, where it's just there, it's just everywhere.
Yeah,
you can just get it, you know?
And I think there's a PhD somewhere in tracking, like, I don't know whether it was import duties or whether somewhere in the 90s it got cheaper to sell VHSs with anime classics on them in outside of Japan, because there was like mid 90s is when my brother started coming back from school with like VHSs of like Yuri Sakadoji and other anime.
God.
Other things like that.
I'm going to drop a flashback on you. Maybe you'll remember this too, because we're from the same part of the world. Jonathan Ross and Channel 4 doing a documentary about manga.
Oh, yeah. That's about the same time he did his documentary on Steve Ditko as well.
That was a few years later.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and he's sort of saying, because there was all this tabloid sort of unease about manga, and they were just talking about Legend of the Overfiend and potential.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and then Jonathan Ross does his thing and says, well, it's not just that. There's also Porco Rosso. It's Miyazaki's movies, and trying to. I've always respected him in that respect, that he has this passion for these niche subcultures, and he will go to the mat for them. Similar to his Steve Ditko documentary, where he rocks up at his house with Neil Gaiman and goes, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you," and Ditko's like, "I do not want to talk to you. Go away."
I think what the quote is, I think he told me to fuck off in a really polite way.
Very good, very good. Well, Fionnuala, is there anything else you'd like to mention before we end this conversation?
Oh, yes. I'm in a group exhibition that is opening in Santiago de Compostela at the end of October. So if any of your listeners are in Spain, I think it will be called Women Unbecoming, and it's an exhibition of work of female artists who participated in the WOM Arts residencies. It's illustrators, comic book authors, printmakers, and lens-based fine artists. And it's a group show of work inspired by the Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir's text on its, I think it's centenary of something. I'm not sure. I don't have the text in front of me.
1939, would it be?
Maybe it's the 80th anniversary then of the Second Sex, but it's to do with an anniversary or something. And the WOM Arts project is to support and promote female artists working in Europe. So that should be really interesting. It's been in Slovenia and it's been in Croatia. And then the next stop is Santiago, and then it'll go to Angoulême in January. So it's worth anybody who's in the area and would like to see the show.
I have a copy of The Second Sex in my hand right now. It was published in 1949. So there you go. That's the anniversary.
Okay. That's 70 years? Yeah, 70 years then.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I got that hardly wrong.
No. And if people want to get in touch, where can they find you? Twitter actually don't go to my website quite yet because I haven't finished rebuilding it. You should be able to contact me on that, but I'm not entirely sure that works. So Twitter, what's my username on Twitter again? Is it Baby Eat Your Dingo? Yes, it is. Baby Eat Your, spelled Y-O-R, Dingo.
Yeah. So kids these days, teach like 19-year-olds, and you make the in Soviet Russia jokes, and they just look at you like, what? Like, nobody gets that anymore.
Very good. Well, listen, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on to Certain Comics. And again, I love the book, and folks out there, pick it up, The Trial of Roger Casement. I strongly recommend it.
Fionnuala's website is thetrialofrogercasement.com. Let us know what you think. email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com, tweet us at deconcomics, like our Facebook page, or join our active Facebook group. We'd also really appreciate your supporting us with a pledge on Patreon. Our tiers start at just $2 a month. Pledge at least $4 a month to get our Patreon-only series Spider-Man 1963 and Tim Catches Up with the MCU, where this weekend we'll publish our review of Spider-Man Homecoming. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics to join the fun. Can you think of one person you know who would enjoy what we're doing on Deconstructing Comics and Critiquing Comics? Send that person a text message right now and let them know about our show. Thanks. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Critiquing Comics will return in a few weeks. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics favorite Kristen Tipping talks about Evil Witch Alley, a book for sad pets, and more. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.